Hello and welcome to Human Ascension with Ellie. Um, we're currently on episode 42 and we've come a really long way. I want to take stock of one of the aspects of where we've been coming from and to kind of help us to slot it in into where we may be going next with this show. And it actually starts off with why I'm here on working in media in the first place, because until recently I wasn't doing that. I was doing something entirely different, and I've talked about that in the past. But there's something that should be kept in mind every time you hear my voice, whether it's here at KJRA, whether it's on my YouTube channel, whether it's in my new book, for example, or on podcast or anything. I ended up being here in media, and I do the tarot readings and I do the research and I do all of those things and the writing and everything because of a prophecy that I saw 40 years ago. And it's taken me down a path where I'm exploring all kinds of things in trying to understand why it feels as though this prophecy just continues to come back. It's trying to unfold, and it feels that way in so many different ways. That 1980s prophecy that I saw, actually, I don't know when the prophecy originated, but I saw it in the 1980s for the first time. And it was written on a tiny little pamphlet that had been like in a little booklet style that belonged to a religious organization, and it was dropped on my friend's coffee table. I think along with some, supermarket pamphlets and things like that, that that my friends had actually just taken out of their letterbox, their mailbox, and put on the coffee table. And while I was at my friend's house, my partner at the time and I were just flicking through whatever we, could see on the coffee table while we were waiting for our friends to get ready. And that's when I saw this prophecy in that pamphlet. It's something that, it may have been the 1980s, but it's something that just changed. It ultimately changed my life, even back then when I didn't know it was going to. It didn't seem at the time to be something that I would remember for more than a minute. It certainly didn't seem as though it'd be something that I'd be chasing for, in later years, and it's been such a long time. It's at the time it just seemed like run-of-the-mill fear-mongering religious stuff, you know, join the church or you'll be damned forever, that kind of thing. But it's been 40 years and it still seems to be relevant. And I'm really surprised that I still remember it so vividly. I even remember the moment that I read it so vividly. But I think it's because everything in my life changed at that point. I didn't realize it, but it was traveling down a path and it brought me to where I am today. So I'm 100% today in 19, what is it now? Not 19 anything. It's 2024. In 2024, I am 100% devoted to getting as many answers as I can, stemming from that prophecy, but resulting in all kinds of questions related to everything. And what makes it great is I don't really have to be hidden away in a dusty room like an academic doing it all by myself. I get to do it with you. I get to take you along for the ride with me. And I've noticed that there are so many people that are enjoying the exploration just as much as I am. So it's really nice to have that company. Many people who listen to my show know a lot about Chris Bledsoe because I've talked about him a lot. He was actually a third of the discussion in episode 1 of the show. But for anyone who's popping in for the first time, just a little recap on Chris Bledsoe. Chris Bledsoe is a former successful home builder. He was building something like 200 homes a year, and he was very well off. I believe that he even had a helicopter or a private plane or something, and he was living at large. But then, as a result of the increasing economic issues surrounding 9/11 and also the banking crisis in around about 2008 or so and the build-up towards that, he went broke. The government stopped all military housing projects, which I think was Chris Bledsoe's bread and butter. And he went from being really well off to being very cash poor, to the point where he was not able to, there was one point where he was having trouble, I think he said he was having trouble figuring out how to organize school lunches for his children. Chris was and I think he still is, a devout Christian. And he was the kind of Christian who would be increasingly searching for wisdom and guidance from God. He began compulsively praying for help. And this compulsive praying is something that we often hear about when it comes to manifesting some kind of a unexplained response from the cosmos in some way. And this is something that happened with Chris. He was by himself in the woods, and he was compulsively praying for the umpteenth time because he'd been doing it a lot. He was just desperate. And at that moment, he saw what he thought was a UFO or UFOs. They were lights in the sky. And he also saw some kind of beings on the ground that he wasn't able to identify. This had never happened to him before. And he also had a vision of an angelic creature. He calls her she's a shimmering lady dressed in white, and he calls her the Lady in White. She appeared to him once I think he appeared to him twice. Once in a hypnotic regression, he claims that he was elevated from his bed right through the roof cavity of his house, and he ended up being escorted by these angelic creatures to meet with her. But then she also took him by surprise, I believe in 2012, and she just came to him spontaneously in the form of a bull that kind of ran him over out of nowhere. And then as he was shocked by the entrance of the bull, she manifested into this Lady in White. And during that visitation, she gave him a prophecy about the future that she said would be unfolding in 2026. The details of that are in previous episodes of the show, but basically the prophecy linked to Easter 2026 and then also other events throughout that year. And she said, and this is a quote, she said to him, "When the red star of Regulus meets the eye of the Sphinx, all would be revealed." So this show, Human Ascension with Ali, began with a description of Chris Bledsoe's experiences and how those experiences linked to predictions that were made by the psychic Edgar Cayce, the one that they call the sleeping prophet from the early 20th century. Edgar Cayce talked about the secrets of humanity and the truth of our existence and our creation here on Earth that were buried beneath the Sphinx in Egypt. So Edgar Cayce said that there is a wealth of knowledge about humanity and the history of humanity, why and how it was created, how we were created, and sort of all of these wisdoms about reality and the way things really are. And that it's contained in documents that that will be revealed at some point, but that are hidden beneath the right paw of the Sphinx, that giant Sphinx in Giza in Egypt. But also there are other secrets, other hidden wisdoms that Edgar Cayce claims are hidden in other areas of the world as well. But the one that is most coveted and has been explored and examined by everyone from archaeological people to spiritual people and even religious people is the one beneath the Sphinx in Egypt. Edgar said that these secrets would eventually be found and unearthed. And somewhere at a time, it would happen at a time when humanity was experiencing great unrest and division and challenges, and people around the world were feeling angry and oppressed and were acting rebelliously. Kind of like the way that it feels is sort of slowly unfolding now, which I don't know, I do wonder whether there's a relationship there. Edgar Cayce said that something would occur that would result in the revealing of those hidden secrets during the height of unrest. Now, it was speculated by people who follow Edgar Cayce, because Edgar died in the early 20th century. And after he died, it was, well, early to mid 20th century actually. After he died, people who followed him kind of did the calculation and they believed that this event would occur somewhere in the late 1990s. But this is not Edgar Cayce stating that. He had stated that it would occur at a time of unrest that was coming relatively soon. And it's now been believed that actually the prediction that he made could relate to a time slightly later than the 90s, so perhaps even the current time. So in that first episode of Human Ascension with Ellie, episode 1, I was able to link the Chris Bledsoe experience with the Edgar Cayce predictions, and also a third link there was the writings of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who spoke about the lost civilization of Atlantis. There seemed to just be a connection between the three, and so I talked about them and tried to demonstrate how they might be connected. Plato talked about a highly advanced civilization that had become corrupted. It was ultimately destroyed through a variety of different means, including wars and its own self-destruction, but also due to natural disasters, including a great massive flood, which is similar to, or even maybe the same flood that appears in the Bible. Bible scholars seem to think that the great flood that appears in the Bible took place in around about 6000 BC. However, there seems to be an increasing amount of evidence that it probably took place somewhere between 11,000 and 10,000 BC, which is also at around about the time that Atlantis is speculated to have existed at that time as well. So it could very well be the same massive flood. In addition to what Plato has said and what is written in the Bible, almost every religion in the world, or even native tradition and folklore, all has a similar story about that kind of a great flood that has wiped out humanity and the civilization and left a few special folk to be able to repopulate the earth from scratch. Even here in Australia with the indigenous Aboriginal tribes, there is folklore of that nature. Now the Australian Aborigines, our indigenous folk here, they've been shown in recent years through scientific analysis to actually to carry the oldest surviving DNA known in the world. So there was some debate about whether the Indigenous Australians were the oldest living civilization. I understand that recently it's been basically determined through science and DNA that yes, they are the oldest surviving race on Earth. And their Dreamtime folklore includes descriptions of this great flood that affected all of humanity and caused it to have to start again. So, as you can imagine, there was a lot of work with this to work this into episode 1 of this show, but I was able to show that throughout the ages, starting with Plato and even as recently as Edgar Cayce and then even Chris Bledsoe, there's it seems like a wild ride, but it seems as though there's some consistency there. And that means that we're talking about ancient civilizations, things like angels, and also extraterrestrial beings all being part of the same kind of story. So it's taken us here on this show on a ride that goes to all different kinds of directions, because I'm not going to put any limits on where I look for answers. But, I look for clues and they seem to add another layer to life that helps me to understand. So I found, as I mentioned before, a hypnotic regression from Chris Bledsoe in which he talked about having been abducted and traveling through the roof cavity of his home to meet with the Lady of White. I talked about the star system called Regulus on the show and how it has 3 stars inside that star system. One of the stars within the regular star system has never been directly observed by scientists, but we know that it exists And as it happens, we also know that it's dying. Now remember that the lady in white said to Chris that when the red star of Regulus meets the eye of the Sphinx, all will be revealed. Everything will be revealed to humanity. Well, this third star in the Regulus system is dying. And when stars die, they turn red. And so I looked into that. And I looked to see when the star system of Regulus might be in a place in the sky that corresponds with what the lady in white had predicted would take place, being that it would be in line with the eye of the Sphinx. And I found a date in 2026 that has really peculiar and extremely rare planetary activity. Now, Regulus does rise due east in Giza in Egypt, directly opposite the Sphinx, once or twice a year, depending on the year. However, on October the 7th at 5:30 in the morning in Giza in Egypt, Regulus is going to rise due east directly opposite the Sphinx. And so I did an analysis of the planetary transitions at that time. And that day was really interesting compared to any other astrological alternative. And it seemed as though the planets would line up in a way that would produce a very special event of some kind, or would reflect a very special event. Not only would the regular star system directly line up with the Sphinx at that moment, but all of the outer planets, the ones that can take as much as nearly 250 years to do one complete orbit of the Earth, well, all of those outer planets would be transitioning into masculine signs of the zodiac. And that this would have occurred at the moment that Regulus meets the eye of the Sphinx at 5:30 in Giza on October the 7th, 2026. I've done an episode that actually is dedicated to this planetary lineup, and I believe that it's called something along the lines of the date and the place and the time when everything we know about the world is going to change. And I've talked about that in a lot of detail on that episode. I think it's episode 4 or 5 of this show, something like that. But the manner in which the outer planets line up at that precise moment, it sounds weirdly familiar to what Chris Bledsoe and Edgar Cayce and others have said. That the world will be in heightened turmoil, that anger and rebellion will have broken out, and that the people of the world will be feeling outraged by something that's taken place in the world. Something that affects a massive portion of humanity, perhaps an entire nation, or perhaps even the entire world. And that the moment in time would spark some kind of a revelation, something new, some kind of new information could be revealed. When you do an analysis of the planets at that time, in that location, it's uncanny because those planets and all the planets will have finally transitioned into the zodiac places, into the houses in which they appear, that are understood by astrologers and have been over hundreds of years to signify new discoveries, new frontiers, new ways of understanding life and reality, and a kind of a release from the status quo, from the old ways, and allowing a freedom to move forward into a new way. It seems a bit like the floodgates are going to open wide, and it's going to be like a calling, come this way. And so I definitely have October 7th at 5:30 in Giza in my calendar for 2026. I'm not saying that it's going to happen exactly at that moment, but it seems as though something is beginning or occurring at around about that time that may unfold shortly thereafter. So today I want to look at that. I wanted to kind of remind us of the reason why I am doing the things that I do. And it all relates to that. And that's one of the reasons why I've taken such an interest in Chris Bledsoe, because he seems to fit in some way. And I can't explain exactly what what the connection is. Sometimes you see something happen and then you hear about something else and then you see something else, and they all seem to be carrying the baton for each other as though they're in a relay moving forward in a race. That's how this kind of looks to me. And I want to look at it from a particular perspective today. We have a bit of a dilemma when it comes to this revelation that could very well be occurring towards the end of 2026 or maybe early 2027 or something like that. And by revelation, I mean, the dictionary definition of revelation. I'm not talking about the book of Revelation or anything like that. I'm not talking about tribulation and the Antichrist and so forth. Although, who knows? It seems as though everything is kind of intertwined. They might be the same thing for all I know. The dilemma that I'm talking about today is it's about the possibility of that revelation maybe being related to disclosure, the alien thing, and the concept that there might be otherworldly beings out there that are for some reason involved with humanity and the earth. Because what comes up in my research is a variety of different perspectives that can lead to entirely different kinds of outcomes. And I want to look at them a bit more closely just today, but also in future episodes as well. So first of all, let's begin with the book of Revelation and the potential for there being messages there about aliens. And also another book, which is the book of Enoch, which was discovered in the mid-20th century as being part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, I have done an episode about the book of Revelation and how it might relate to alien dialogue in the previous episode as well. And I want to kind of marry all of this together today so that we can see the reason why I go in the directions that I do. In the book of Revelation, it says that Noah was Enoch's son, and he was special in the eyes of God, just like Enoch was special in the eyes of God. And God is said to appear a lot in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament. Okay, he has lots of names. He's called Yahweh, Jehovah, El Shaddai, Adonai, El Elyon, El Roi, El Olam, and Elohim. And that last one, Elohim, is a little bit tricky. It's a plural word. It can only be translated into there being multiple gods. So unless you cheat and you start telling people that Elohim means lots of different manifestations of the single God, or looking at God from a different perspective and that kind of thing, all of that's a bit of a fib. Or at the very best, it's a bit of a fudge, right? It's just not true. Elohim, the word Elohim, can only be used in the context of there being many something or a family of something. And what it's talking about is many gods or a family of gods, like the ancient civilizations of Egypt believed, or even earlier, the people of Atlantis worshipped. The possibility of there being many entities that were worshipped, revered, or maybe feared, like they were gods. Is it possible that these gods were actually aliens? Were they extraterrestrial sentient beings? If you look at the book of Revelation or even the book of Enoch, some of these entities were scary or cruel or angry, and they were easily enraged. So is it possible that if they were extraterrestrials and they were exhibiting this scary, cruel, angry, enraged kind of persona, is it possible that they were worshipped by humanity because it was safer to worship them? Because if you worshipped them, you could keep them placated? And then there are others who were benevolent and kind. They taught humanity many new skills of survival and how to thrive and how to build on knowledge and learn new things. So were those entities worshipped because they were like heroes? You see, worship in a godlike way that we understand it to be today may not have been the same thing that worship was before. Worship may have been a response to fear, or it may have been a response to admiration and gratitude. We don't know. But also the Bible is full of references to slavery, which I've also talked about in previous episodes. But none of the references are related to white people owning black people. That's a modern thing that we've created, that man has created in the modern day. In the Bible, anyone could be a slave. I mean, mostly it was women. And there were people who didn't have their own means for survival, so they were in servitude to someone else in order to survive. But it does make me wonder also if perhaps humanity was created for the purposes of being slaves to another race of beings. Now, the book of Revelation hints at the fact that that may have actually been the case, but it all depends on translation, the way that you translate the things that you're reading in the Bible. There's also a possibility that humanity already existed on Earth, but we were harnessed by sentient beings from somewhere else who intervened on our planet for their own purposes. Because after all, the book of Enoch, for example, says that God's angels were tasked with watching over humanity in the earth. Were they angels that were watching over the slaves of the earth? Because those angels, some of them took human women as wives, a bit like the slave owners in the South used to do from time to time as well. And when they took women as wives, sometimes they produced these giants called the Nephilim from from bedding down with these wives. And the Nephilim were like mutant creatures that were huge and destructive. They devoured the earth's resources, and then when they started to even eat the flesh of humans. And so ultimately they had to be destroyed with yet another natural disaster, or perhaps even the same natural disaster as the flood. The reason why I ask is because there are fossils of giant human beings that have been found from time to time. For example, in China, fossils of a massive human-like creature have been found not that long ago. The race of the creature is referred to as Homo juliensis. Homo juliensis. Homo juliensis. The fossils indicate that this creature that was found was almost the same in proportion to a human, standing upright with similar kinds of proportions, as I said, but they were at least 30% bigger. So they were at least 8 feet tall and with thick, stocky muscles, kind of like a Neanderthal, if you can imagine that. Is this an example of one of those giant ancient humans that we call the Nephilim now? I mean, we really don't know. There are other belief systems when it comes to aliens that may be relevant to everything that I've been talking about on the show that stems, of course, from the prophecy. For example, I did an episode not that long ago on an organization called Share International and its founder, Benjamin Creme. Share International has a belief system that relates to aliens. They call those aliens or otherworldly beings space brothers who lived on Earth a long time ago and have since been involved in humanity's affairs for thousands of years. They're an advanced race and they're here to guide humanity's evolution. But they're benevolent by nature and they're here to help humanity to reach a higher state of consciousness and its own spiritual enlightenment. But in another example, and I've covered this as well in an earlier episode, I talk about a fellow by the name of Marshall Vian Summers and what he calls the allies of humanity. And the story is completely the opposite to that of Share International. Marshall Vian Summers claims, in a similar way that Chris Bledsoe claims, that he received a communication from an angelic being. This was in the 70s, I believe, or maybe the 80s. And he received a warning from this angelic being, or this angelic entity, about the true intent of extraterrestrials that were residing on Earth at the current time. That he was told that they live in the mountains and under the sea, and sometimes they appear as craft in the skies. The warning was that there are no benevolent aliens here, because the galactic treaty between the planets prohibits visitation. You're not allowed to visit the planet. You're not allowed to move in on the planet that belongs to a different species. And so those that are here have broken the galactic treaty. The aliens that are here, or the ETs that are here, have selfish intent. They want the Earth's resources and they want to harness humanity as a workforce. And that sounds very similar to what appears if you interpret the book of Revelation. If you interpret the Old Testament and the concept of slavery that appears in the Old Testament. And Marshall V. N. Summers said that the angelic being or the angelic presence also told him that these extraterrestrials, these aliens that are residing here on Earth, are much smarter than we are. Instead of fighting us in battle for supremacy, they're outsmarting us, which is exactly what a smart, higher entity of higher intelligence would do. They wouldn't fight a grubby little war. They would just outsmart us. They would make us believe that they're doing us a favor, like we're special, because people love to feel special. And the truth is that there are more, the truth is that there are more stars in the galaxy than there are grains of sand across all the beaches of the world. And so we're not special. We're one of hundreds of billions of possibilities. However, we might be easy to convince. And if we've always wanted to feel that we're kind of the center of the universe and that Earth is special and that humanity is special. And so this is something that we could resonate with if it's being communicated to us. So Marshall V. N. Summers said that this angelic message that he received, or these messages, because he received them for around 10 years actually, came from a federation of cosmic entities. Just like the Galactic Federation kind of concept that you might hear about with other people, because the Galactic Federation is a concept that many people do believe in, being that there's a federation with its own treaty of entities, sentient beings from all over the galaxy and even galaxies beyond, where a little bit like having United Nations treaties, where there's an agreement between the different planetary nations as to what the laws of the cosmos are going to be. And one of those laws is that beings from one planet are never to set foot against the will of another planet. But if you're invited in, then sure. If we say, yeah, come on in, then we're inviting them. All right. But it is against the law and that galactic treaty to intercept another entity's planet against their will. But if the angelic presence said to Marshall V. N. Summers that the reason why they had made contact collectively is they're not going to come here. They're not going to come and save us. They're not going to intervene. They want us to learn, however, that we're being outsmarted by another being. And we need to grow up and we need to realize that we will never be saved by someone else, that we have to save ourselves. So some people say that Marshall V. N. Summers is a bit of a religious kook. I understand that he has some kind of a ministry. I've seen the website. I've seen the literature that he posts for free, which is the messaging from this angelic presence. And he also has a YouTube channel where he talks about the messaging, and he's been doing so for a very long time. He has a YouTube channel that I believe is called Marshall V. N. Summers. He has a son by the name of Reed Summers who also has a YouTube channel, and they talk about these things a lot. But he doesn't come across as being a religious kook. He devotes his channel to that of relaying the messages again and again that were provided to him by the angelic presence, which he calls the allies of humanity. The messages were predominantly received in 1996 and continually after that for around 10 years. And all of the messages that Marshall V. N. Summers has received appear in books that are available to read online for free. So he has links to every single word that has been shared with him on his website that I believe is Allies of Humanity website. And you don't need to buy them. You can actually read them. So he's not looking for money either. He doesn't seem to be insisting on getting paid for any of this information. He doesn't do a lot of gigs where, he's promoting anything with anyone. In fact, he seems quite reclusive. And he doesn't preach any kind of religious messaging either. He talks about people of all kinds of faith or even non-faith getting together and learning to get along with each other for the greater good, because if we are united, we can present a united front against anyone who's threatening our sovereignty, whether they're doing it in war or even with the gently, softly, softly approach. And Marshall's son, Reed Summers, has a channel too, as I mentioned, which I think is just called Reed Summers. And he likes to talk about topics of disclosure. So he invites guests on his show to discuss, for example, the congressional hearings into UAPs and UFOs. He tends to stay away from anything related to faith or religion or tradition or anything like that. He kind of provides an intelligent voice in the debate about the possibility of sentient beings from unearthly origins who may or may not have an interest in humanity or Earth. So these are just a couple of the different perspectives. You can see the difference between the Share International and the Marshall and Reed Summers, Marshall v. Summers and the Reed Summers perspectives. We don't know whether aliens are benevolent or malevolent, but there's a understanding that they're there and they're part of the picture, but that there's also this angelic presence as well and a cosmic presence. And it's hard to tell whether they're all the same or they're all different, but it all relates to there being something coming in the future. So I wanted to just briefly talk about Scientology, which is kind of, a bit out there, but the reason why is because it also has an ET-based philosophy. I'm not agreeing with or condoning Scientology. I understand, there's a lot of controversy around Scientology, particularly when it comes to the way people who've left that faith talk about how they've been treated in the past. But it's a very secretive organization and philosophy, and it does have, it has leaked from time to time, and it has produced awareness of this extraterrestrial philosophy within Scientology as well. So we're not actually, supposed to know any of this, but, I found this on Wikipedia, so it obviously exists. In the Church of Scientology, there's a hidden knowledge, and it's reserved only for those people who reach the highest levels of hierarchy, the most advanced teachings. It's called the Xenu story is actually the most advanced that we, the general public, could get access to at this time. And it's the advanced teaching reserved only for operating Thetan level 3 course. So in order to understand what this means, let me give you some context. Scientology is broken up into 15 different levels of hierarchy, and it's then subdivided into 3 categories. So 3 categories containing a total of 15 different levels. The first 4 levels, actually 0 through 4, are referred to as pre-clears. And the pre-clears are the lowest hierarchy, where people who've escaped Scientology and then go on to 60 Minutes to talk about their experiences and things like that, they tend to come from levels 0 to 4, from this pre-clear level. They talk about things like being treated like slaves, who they were forced to work for free and live in horrible living conditions, or go without sleep or without food or whatever. And I don't know what the intention is really for treating people that way, because Scientology is very secretive, and they often deny, when a spokesperson is asked, they'll deny that any of that has taken place. But, there's a reasonable assumption that perhaps it has taken place, because it's been reported by lots of people who have left Scientology. I'm going to be open-minded about this and make an assumption based on the other things that I know that I'm going to tell you about, that these first 4 levels or so are like a cleansing program where you break a person down so that they are empty and can be rebuilt again into what they need to be, a little bit like they do in the army, where they break you down so they can rebuild you. The problem I have with this, though, is that some people tend to skip this level. So, for example, famous people who are rich tend to skip that pre-cleanse or pre-clear level, and they go directly into a higher level of membership of Scientology. And so it's really hard to stay open-minded about the religion because of that. But it does sound a little bit like the term pre-clear does sound a little bit like it's a cleaning out of the old ways to make room for something new. So the next levels are levels 5 and 6, and these are called the clears. I'm going to skip past these levels of Scientology really quickly. It's very secretive and I really don't have any information about this, but basically it seems as though level 5 and 6 are about people who've been emptied of whatever it was that they were cleansed from in the previous levels. So then the higher levels begin at 7. So levels 7 through 15 are called the operating thetans. And this group has a progressive system taking place called auditing, which is supposed to enlighten but also release what they refer to as disembodied souls that are trapped inside the human body. I don't exactly know what this means, because of course Scientology, as I said 100 times, is really secretive. And so even if I get a few things wrong, remember my resource for this is Wikipedia. So, take it as you will. There's a story that has been exposed or has leaked out of Scientology that is related to the operating thetan level 3, which is level 9 out of a possible 15 levels. So it's just beyond the halfway point of advancement in Scientology. And it relates to aliens and how those aliens relate to humanity. So it's called the Xenu story. The way that the Xenu story goes, and this is a secret teaching in Scientology, okay. Basically, the way it goes, 75 million years ago, there was an extraterrestrial called Xenu. He was the leader of the Galactic Confederacy, which is the Federation of Planets. Now, as I said earlier, anyone who's interested in UFOs and alien topics probably already knows that right now, at this very moment, there are people out there who believe that a galactic federation exists. I actually have colleagues here at KGRA who claim to have been invited to be members of that galactic federation. I don't know how that would work or how it's even possible. I mean, I am a little bit woo-woo, but I'm obviously not woo-woo enough to fully understand the concept of a galactic federation. I don't know if we all sit at a massive table with weird-looking creatures, a bit like that Schwarzenegger movie, what was it, Total Recall, where you may have a green goblin over here and collectively bargaining with a 10-foot woman who's got 3 boobs over there, that kind of thing. I don't know whether that's it or whether they're angelic manifestations of a federation and that we kind of present in an angelic form as well. I don't know. Or maybe we're just invited telepathically. I remember recently hearing a conversation between 2 people on a show somewhere who claimed to have attended a Galactic Federation meeting. Their memories were really sketchy about this, but they were pretty certain that they had been there. So I don't know, maybe I just have a lot to learn about that kind of thing. But moving on. This fellow Xenu was the dictator who was the leader of the Galactic Federation, basically, 75 million years ago. And the Federation was experiencing an overpopulation of the planets. And so Xenu, because he was a dictator, he ordered that many billions of his people, which I guess was represented by the variety of planets, he ordered that the entities living on these planets, that many billions of them, be transported to Earth to alleviate that overpopulation problem that the other planets were having. So billions of beings were gathered up and they were deported or transported to Earth. And they were brought to Earth in what appeared to be like aircraft in a similar way that, humans make aircraft. It looks a little bit like airplanes. And when they arrived on Earth, Zenu ordered that they all be exterminated. So they used hydrogen bombs, supposedly, with massive explosions to exterminate these excess population of entities. And they used so much explosive that the impact of those explosives from the bombings caused the souls of these beings to be thrust out of their bodies. So they become disembodied souls. And that's what a thetan is in Scientology. A thetan is a disembodied soul. So the souls were captured as they were exploded out of bodies. They were captured by Zenu's army, and they were subjected to brainwashing with electronic devices. I guess to erase their memories or something. I'm not really sure. Destroy them in some way. I'm not really sure. But these souls or thetans were so severely traumatized that they attached themselves to whatever they could as some form of a remedy. And they ultimately ended up attaching themselves to human form, where they could find human form, like a possession by a thetan spirit, which is similar to kind of like a demonic possession. And Scientologists believe that this possession or attachment of the body by thetans is called a body thetan. So this is when a thetan soul, which is the same thing, a thetan and a soul is the same thing, has attached itself to a human. Scientologists believe that that thetan attachment or body thetan is the cause of many of the spiritual and psychological problems that people experience today. So we might call it, stress or anxiety or mental illness or paranoia or anger issues or whatever, but it's actually an embodiment or a possession by a severely traumatized soul, referred to as a thetan. And so as a member of Scientology elevates to the thetan level, they learn how to release the attachment of those thetans. I mean, it sounds really science fiction-y, and the creator of Scientology was a science fiction author, but who knows? There's a lot of stuff out there, and even some of the stuff from the Bible is just as weird as Scientology. And so who am I to judge, But there are other religions that believe in extraterrestrial sentient beings as well. There's the Aetherius Society, which was founded in the mid-1950s by George King. It combines elements of theosophy, yoga, and UFO beliefs. And the society teaches that advanced extraterrestrial civilizations referred to as cosmic masters exist on other planets in our solar system. And these cosmic masters are believed to help humanity by transmitting spiritual energy and guiding us towards enlightenment. This is very similar to Share International's philosophy as well. There's also Heaven's Gate, and Heaven's Gate was founded by some individuals in 1970. I think it was Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles founded Heaven's Gate in 1970s. This group believed that they could transform themselves into immortal extraterrestrial beings by rejecting their human nature. They thought that a spaceship would come to take them to a higher level of existence one day. And unfortunately, in 1997, 39 members of the group died in a mass suicide, believing that a spaceship was coming to get them, when in fact it was actually, a comet, I think, that was detected at the time. There's also the Unarius Academy of Science, which was founded in 1954. It's a UFO religion that teaches that humans can communicate with extraterrestrials through telepathy and other psychic abilities, and that the extraterrestrial beings are known as space brothers, which is really very similar also to the Share International concept, and that their role is to help humanity evolve spiritually and scientifically. This is very similar. I'm not saying that he's a believer in the Unarius Academy of Science, but Bashar, the hybrid extraterrestrial being that is channeled by Darryl Anka, is sort of sitting in this line of thought as well, that that the purpose for the channeling is to help humanity solve its problems and achieve a greater awareness. And that's why we're able to, or certain people are able to, telepathically communicate with these entities. What some people may not realize is that the Nation of Islam has teachings that suggest that extraterrestrial beings referred to as Moors visited Earth and played a role in the creation of the first humans, a bit like the ancient aliens philosophy or the starseed philosophy. And the Islamic faith also has a belief in a broader sense of the hidden history of advanced civilizations and their influence over human development. So this links directly back to things that Plato had said and Edgar Cayce has said about there being hidden knowledge out there that links to humanity and links to extraterrestrial sentient beings and links to the creation of Earth and the world. And then finally, there's also Raelism, which was founded by a fellow called Claude Vorilhon, who goes by the name of Rael. And in the 70s, he began teaching that life on Earth was scientifically created by extraterrestrial beings called the Elohim. Now, if you're aware of Paul Wallace, who has a channel on YouTube, he's a former minister who now writes books about that are all themed on the Garden of Eden and this extraterrestrial descriptor. If you reinterpret the Bible, you find all of these ET references. Well, Paul Wallace, I can't say that he's a realist, but he also refers to the Elohim as being a species of extraterrestrials as well. So there's a crossover there. It just kind of gives you an indication of how there's so much going on. There's also, the concept of star people and sky gods that are common in folklore and traditional culture, like Native American folklore and the ancient Mesopotamian mythologies relating to the Anunnaki, the ancient Egyptian mythology relating to the god Ra, and other deities such as Horus and Nut. And they all are related to celestial phenomena and entities from the sky, sentient beings from the sky. Extraterrestrials also, and the concept of flying machines called Vimanas feature in Hindu writings. And Greek and Roman mythology also have stories of gods who dwelled in the heavens and interacted with humans. Zeus, for example, is the king of gods in Greek and Roman mythology, was often depicted as residing on Mount Olympus, which was believed to be a gateway between Earth and the celestial realm. And then other gods like Apollo were associated with the sun and the stars. So we've got all of these ideas of there being extraterrestrial kind of concepts out there. You also have African mythology and, of course, as I mentioned, the Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime. I know that I began this episode with a reminder of the prophecy that I saw in the 1980s. Okay, and it seems as though I've diverted off into an unrelated topic, which is that about aliens. As time goes on, however, I tend to start to believe with the research that I've done that we're looking at things in an oversimplified way. We look at things like we think of it in terms of angels, or we think of it in terms of aliens, or fairies, or demons. But they might all be different types of the same thing, or different perceptions of the same type, or different views from different dimensions. And I'm just not convinced that that any of these things are a done deal. It's not just the modern world, and it's not just myself and people like me who believe that there's something else out there. Polls that have been done indicate that the majority of people, at least 60% of the world, whenever there's a test out there, they all say that there's more than what meets the eye. And that somehow humanity is intertwined with something else, something bigger. The question is this something else? Are these other beings? You know, are the angels are angels and demons and fairies and ETs all the same thing and we're just oversimplifying and separating them off? Because ever since the beginning of humanity, every single tradition has a concept of something that can be interwoven into the ET story. And the question I have for today is, are they an entity that are controlling us, or are they guiding us? And it seems as though whatever they are and whatever their intention was, they were once here. And they will return one day. And I wonder whether that one day is one day in 2026. I do. I often wonder that. But it seems as though something is coming. But maybe it's not that something is coming. Maybe it's that somebody is coming. Either way, it seems that it's happening soon. So I guess we're going to find out one day, one way or another. And meanwhile, I'm just going to keep looking for explanations and chipping away at what's out there. One of the ways that I do that is with tarot. I ask questions and strangely enough, the cards are consistent. They keep giving me a very similar answer that something is coming. And anyone who's seen me do my tarot readings knows that the cards always have the same range of definitions and I always do it the same way. But something seems to be happening out there and it's coming closer and closer. Anyway, as I've mentioned last week, I think it was for the very first time, I have had a new book published. It's called Tarot Well Done. It's, I believe, the one book you need that can take you from being a complete beginner with practically no knowledge or even zero knowledge of tarot and how it works and transforming yourself into a proficient tarot card reader. I think it's all you need as a learning resource. It's a combination of intelligent, well-informed perspective on tarot, everything from the origins of tarot to descriptions of colors and symbols and links to numerology and methods of interpretation, and treating tarot as though it's a language. But it also is a book that has vivid imagery of the cards, including the minute detail that you might need to be able to see to understand the reason why each card was created the way that it is. It takes you deeper than just memorizing definitions. It takes you into a realm where you understand the concept, which means you don't really have to memorize because you know it. You know it as a language. You can find my book Tarot Well Done on Amazon in standard and also large print and in ebook format. And I've included a link to the options page in the description of today's episode. It's my primary resource on the Ellie channel for being able to search for answers. And then here on the show, I do things the conventional way. So, my name is Ellie and you can find me at Ellie Dreams and Under on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who is listening today on one of KGRA's broadcasting platforms. If you'd like to participate in any of KGRA's live shows and chat with like-minded watchers, experiencers, spiritualists and weirdos like me, then just go to live.kgradb.com and use promo code Ellie to get 30% off your subscription. That's it for today. It's been a wild ride, but it's been a pleasure. Until next time.